Today's lecture for October 20th, 2025 will finish up Chapter 8, looking at social and emotional development for early childhood age group. And then we will start on Chapter 9 on middle childhood physical and cognitive development. This is week 10 of our fall semester. We had just come up to the point looking at emotional and personality development of early childhood age children. And this is where a child's sense of self becomes more complex in this time period. Self-concept and describing oneself according to various categories starts to become important as the child is categorizing things, including themselves, as part of their learning and memory functioning. We look at the aspect of the categorical self, definitions of the self that refer to concrete external traits, such things as, how tall am I, what color is my hair, things like that. As we continue on, we look at self-esteem as an aspect of self-concept, how good a child feels about themselves or doesn't feel about themselves. Children who have high self-esteem probably have developed a good attachment relationship with their parents and show good pro-social behavior. Preschoolers start to make evaluative judgments about their cognitive and physical competencies and whether they're socially accepted by peers and parents. The brain starts to become more and more mature, which helps with the self-regulatory abilities of the child to control their behavior. We look at Erikson's developmental aspect of initiative versus guilt. Children engage in learning new skills on their own. They're starting to become a little more independent and strive to seek independence from their parents and start to master new behaviors. Although there's that guilt aspect. Mom or dad told me not to do that. I know I can do it. I think I can do it. I'm going to try it. But again, they still have that feeling of guilt because of that conflict with what mom or dad told them to do or not do. And that has a tendency to curb efforts to master new skills and experiment and try new things, which again, in some situations is not a bad thing, but that's what Erikson saw as the conflict going on at this age in early childhood. Some of the things that happen in early childhood, right before a child starts school, preschool period, they have a decrease in fears of loud noise, falling, and sudden movement in strangers. In middle childhood, fears of failure and criticism in school start to develop. So their fears peak between the ages of 2.5 and 4 years, and then they decrease, and then they start to learn social fears as they become older. Next, we look at development of gender roles and gender differences as part of this development for early childhood. Gender roles are a cluster of traits and behaviors that are considered stereotypical of females and males. A stereotype is a fixed conventional idea about a group. It creates demand and limits opportunities for both genders. If you are like a stereotype and little boys do these kind of activities, but you're a little boy and you want to do another activity that might be more associated with little girls, it inhibits the child's behavior. We see the stages in gender role stereotypes where children start to label gender by 2 to 2.5 years of age. Children traditionalize jobs, activities, and personality traits between the ages of 3 and 9. Children and adolescents start to perceive their own gender in a positive light. This also gets into the division of labor aspect also. Males and females share different anatomy, different physiologically, different in terms of behaviors, personalities, characteristics, and abilities. There's different hormonal things going on between males and females. Again, a lot of different physical components and physical functions that go on between in girls and boys' bodies. Preschoolers often display differences in their choice of toys and play activities. They start to show these sex-related differences. Boys engage in more rough and tumble play. Girls show more empathy and fear. Sometimes the psychologists look at the theories of development of gender differences. Why do little boys develop some of these interests and behaviors, and why do little girls develop certain interests and behaviors? They think there's some natural things that go on between situations that come up and dealing with problems and adaptation, and that comes way back from caveman time, where men had a tradition, more than likely in many societies, to be warriors and fighters, more adventuresome, aggressive, etc. And women have been more the homemakers and caretakers of the home and caretakers of the children. This is a basic division of labor aspect that we look at with males and females. We also see that the brain of males and females is organized differently, and this, of course, is genetically determined. They do studies on rats and humans that have indicated there are different parts of the brain used in the male versus different parts of the brain used in females and doing different activities. Females, they find, rely more on the hippocampus and the right hemisphere of the brain, along with the prefrontal cortex. Males use the hippocampus in both hemispheres from the studies they've done. Sex hormones are obviously different in males and females and contribute to some of these different aspects and behaviors. Males, again, have high levels of testosterone, and females that have high levels of testosterone can also have male and masculine type behaviors. Exposure to prenatal environments of stressed mothers, I think, might also affect the behavior of children after they're born. And again, some of the basic stereotypical types of preferences: boys play with trucks, girls play with dolls. Social cognitive theory looks at the aspect of genetic and gender differences more from the idea of rewards and punishments. As we get rewarded for certain behaviors through smiles, respect, companionship, praise, things like that, we're going to increase those behaviors. If we receive punishment, where we have frowns, loss of friends, adults say, no, little boys don't do this, little girls don't do that. That is a tendency not to reinforce certain types of behaviors, and that can lead to some of the gender types of activities that little boys and little girls start to exhibit. Again, a lot of socialization from parents and teachers, providing information and reinforcement on what's masculine or what's feminine, so on and so forth. Kohlberg has some ideas on the cognitive development theory of gender and basic aspects of what components are for our having our gender identity. Gender identity, generally defined as knowledge that one is either male or female. Gender stability is a concept that one's gender is not changing, it remains the same. And gender constancy is the idea that our gender remains the same even though our appearance might change, or we might have different behaviors. We still have the actual same gender underneath. Another aspect or theory of gender development is the idea of gender schema theory. Again, we have these ways that we organize information in the brain. We have these schemas that we use, and that's one of the things that is happening for part of our development. As we organize things, we start to see that little boys act in certain ways, little girls act in certain ways. We start to internalize that and as a way to organize a perception of the world and what's going on. There are both biological and social cognition things going on, interacting to affect lots of areas of development and mental processes. And that takes us through our terms here to the end of this chapter. And next we go to our second chapter, Chapter 9, looking at middle childhood, starting to talk about cognitive and physical development. Middle childhood is defined as ages 6 to 12 in general. During this chapter, we will describe trends in physical development in middle childhood, look at changes in motor development, additional changes. Again, we've been looking at all kinds of physical development all the way along and motor development. We will discuss attention deficit hyperactivity disorder situations with children and learning disabilities in general. We will talk about Piaget's concrete operational stage, and we will discuss Piaget and Kohlberg's theories of moral development. So those are some things that we have going on in this chapter that we will cover. Also looking at developments in information processing in middle childhood, intellectual development in middle childhood, looking at theories of intelligence, and talk more about language development in middle childhood, including reading and bilingualism. Growth patterns. During middle childhood, we see that children have an additional growth spurt and can advance at a dramatically rapid rate compared with other periods of their lifespan. Again, from ages 6 to 12 is what we're looking at for middle childhood, that we're talking about this chapter and also chapter 10. During this time, boys and girls will gain approximately 2 inches of height every year, and the child's body weight will double. We look at calorie intake for 4 to 6 year olds being from 1,400 to 1,800 calories. And again, there's a good little growth chart that just shows some aspects of height and weight for middle childhood for boys and girls, and we see there's again a pretty steady upward curve as compared to the early childhood that we just finished discussing. Gender similarities and differences in middle childhood. We see that boys start to become slightly heavier and taller than girls through the age of 9 or 10. They develop more muscles. Girls have an adolescent growth spurt and surpass boys in height and weight until about age 13 or 14. Girls can have a tendency to develop more body fat. And there's a chart that looks at different ages of children and some of the obesity that we have in children aged 6 to 12 and the percentage of obesity in the United States, and looking at different ethnic groups. there's a lot of emphasis placed on overweight since so many children are overweight these days, and looking at causes of why children are overweight. We have genetic reasons from heredity. There's the sugar component, where sugar is satisfying to us and we have a tendency to want to please our pleasure center in the brain, and we have more tendency to want to eat things that are sugary and sweet, and so we will consume higher levels of sugary drinks and sweet food, and less healthy food. We do get an awful lot of advertising that influences us to eat some of these foods that are fattening or may have high sugar in them. We look at decreased physical activity. Again, as we've talked before, a lot of it related to video games and using electronics, and less going out and actually being physically active. Sometimes children have limited access to healthy and affordable foods, so that's going to make some difference. They've done some studies that find that children who do not breastfeed have a tendency to be overweight as they get older. And then in general, we just have television and other media that influences children to overeat and override parts of our natural systems that try to keep our body weight out of balance. But again, the thinking beings that we are, we can override those. Next, we look at motor development, and again, more development of the gross motor skills, working with balance, coordination, strength. Muscles are getting stronger, adding additional muscle mass. Neural pathways between the cerebellum and the cortex are becoming more myelinated, more connections there, more signals going back and forth. All of this together means that we're getting quicker and quicker reaction times, that we can react to a stimulus more quickly. By the time our senses send a message to the brain that we need to act now, the brain can process that and send a message to the muscles to react, and that continues to improve, become faster and faster until about age 18. And our fine motor skills during middle childhood continue to develop, and we are developing very good fine motor skills at this age, and developing basic chores and things that we can do with our hands by this age. There's still some general overall awkwardness related to the gross muscle skills and balance, but again, that is continuing to be worked on every year during this age period. Gender differences, we see that boys and girls perform similarly in most motor activities at this age. Boys do have more forearm strength, which aids them in throwing a ball or swinging a bat. Girls have greater limb coordination and overall flexibility. That leads to helping them perform better doing things such as gymnastics, dancing, balancing, things like that. Exercise and fitness, it's good to help children start to establish regular exercise and fitness routines. This will limit the chance and risk of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, some forms of cancer, and other general health conditions that could develop later, as can happen from being overweight. Physically active adolescents and any age really have a better self-image, self-concept, and better coping skills. Cardiac and muscular physical fitness can be developed through aerobic exercises. Next, we look at disorders that affect learning. We have a number of different conditions that affect learning, and we see that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder can be one of those disabilities or disorders. If a child has excessive inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity, It can impair their ability to function at school. If a child has difficulty focusing, or if anybody has difficulty focusing, again, that's part of the memory process. We have to focus on something a certain amount of time, work it into short-term memory, then process it into long-term memory. If you can't focus on something long enough to start getting it processed in short-term memory, you're not going to be able to remember that. You know, we get things that come in and crowd out that. So that's part of what's going on here. And there is some difficulty with the executive control of the brain over motor functions and more primitive functions. So there are some things going on there that physiologically the child is trouble being able to focus and pay attention. Now they found that with some ADHD, stimulants can help to readjust the nervous system so that it can help the child to focus more. This increases the activity of the nervous system. You'd think it would make them more hyperactive, but that's the thing. A child who has true hyperactivity, some of these stimulant medicines actually can help them, help their brain function better so they can have better focus and less distractibility. These stimulants promote the activity of brain chemicals, dopamine and noradrenaline, that are needed to stimulate the executive center of the brain to help control those primitive areas of the brain to help the child have better concentration and focus. And I think that's a good place to stop for now. We'll come back on Wednesday in class and talk about learning disabilities and some of the 13 different areas that are officially classified as learning disabilities in our society. So we'll see you on Wednesday and continue on with that at that time. Thank you.